very honored to be with you today. And as Vivian mentioned, my name is Dai, and I've been at Google for about 11 years, and I've been in this specific role for 4 years. And my team's mission over the last few years has been to accelerate customer digital transformation by redefining how business software is bought and sold. But we are at a pivotal moment now because the ultimate prize is no longer automation via software, it's autonomy via agents. And we're clearly moving to a model where we're shifting where software is just assisting people to more of these digital intelligence systems that can own end-to-end workflows and operate autonomously. So it isn't just putting AI to work, which is the theme for this week, it is seeing the birth of the AI agent economy. So what I'd like to do for this session is to give you an inside look into what we've been doing with Google Cloud Marketplace and how it's rapidly becoming the single trusted control panel for customers to find, acquire, govern, scale this autonomous AI agent workforce. So when we talk about the AI agent economy, what we're talking about is this new economic reality where you have complex cognitive work performed autonomously by a network of specialized digital systems. And the biggest impact that we see is the opportunity to own end-to-end workflows. And that basically means you have to own the trigger and then take the final action. Now, for agents to do this, they need to have a couple core capabilities. First, they need to be able to decompose a goal. You give it a high-level strategic goal, it needs to break that down into a sequence of actionable steps. It needs to coordinate and orchestrate, play like a project manager, where effectively they have to interact with organizations, other systems, or even other agents. Think of multi-agent systems. They also need to adapt in real time, so if they hit an obstacle or a barrier, they need to be able to reason and replan on the fly, leveraging their memory and capabilities. And of course, they need to be able to close the loop, make sure the process is complete, and make sure that everything is updated, whether it be updated in the systems and making sure you have a clear track record or a trail of the actions that it took. So for example, you wouldn't ask an agent to complete a very specific task like draft a contract. You would ask it to buy a product in a category, and that agent should own the sourcing, the negotiation, the purchase order, and the final payment. So that's owning that workflow end to end. So when we think about the opportunity, we think agentic AI will impact every single industry and every single business function. And as Kareem mentioned this morning, it is an economic and organizational rewiring that has transformational impact that we haven't seen since the Industrial Revolution. And now to think what it looks like, what does it mean when you take a workflow and move it from a human operator to a set of agents? So let's go through a couple of examples, right? Think of software development, where you have groups of agents that can write the functional spec, generate the code, do the automated testing, and then handle the end-to-end deployment. Or think of customer service and support, where an agent, which has full visibility across all support channels, voice, email, chat, can autonomously diagnose the issue a refund to the customer, update the appropriate systems, and then confirm it with the end customer. Or say manufacturing and supply chain, where an agent can monitor equipment data, identify where there could be a failure several days in advance, create a maintenance ticket, and then order that spare part, right? So the opportunity we see here is across all industry and functions, but where it's gonna have the most likely near-term and profound impact is those functions and industries that have very high transactional data and high data density, because you give it a continuous feedback loop for these AI systems to basically learn and adapt. So as you look about bringing autonomous AI agents in your organization, you are undoubtedly looking at buy versus build, where there's a lot of custom development that's happening. But over time, as the market gets mature, we're gonna see a model where you're going to start to procure agents like you do software. So what does that mean exactly? Because if you look at the history, the decades of what we've done, we have perfected the art of software procurement and management, where we negotiate licenses, we track seats, we monitor uptime, but managing and procuring and managing a digital workforce is gonna be fundamentally different. Well, for one, you're going to be procuring a capability or an outcome, not a set of tools. So with software, you're buying a license or procuring a license for a fixed set of features. But with agents, you're driving a business outcome. So our SLAs and contracts needs to take a look at things not so much on like uptime, but more around like business outcomes. And what about data? I mean, data is, the agent's only going to be effective in terms of the data it has access to. So now, when we think about giving access to agents, we need to have a very high level of governance around data access, around provable data lineage, and also make sure we demand transparency around how those agents use the data to make decisions. And what about liability? Right? If an agent makes a mistake, takes an action, costs the company millions of dollars, our traditional frameworks don't really apply here. So we need to think about liability and indemnification frameworks that take into account this new agentic AI model and make sure that we have appropriate guardrails, especially if you need human in the loop in terms of checkpoints and guardrails. And then lastly, if you think of the traditional commercial model for software, it's typically access-based. Think of per seat, per user. Well, that doesn't make very much sense in an agentic AI world where the shift is going to be more on business outcome. So think of, like in the customer service example, it might be per ticket processed or per ticket resolved, or in the marketing world, per qualified lead generated. And of course, our financial systems need to be able to account for this value-based consumption model. So when we think about it, think about how we've evolved from software to AI tools and now to AI agents, right? And fundamentally what happens is as you go across, you're seeing that the nature of the work and the value you've created is fundamentally changing. So if you look at traditionally decades of using tools like ERP or spreadsheets, these are great tools and powerful tools, but they're fundamentally inert because they require human input, human to analyze the output, and determine the next step. They're basically augmenting human execution. Then came along a few years ago, copilots, right? Offered by a lot of these software incumbents and providers. And what they're doing is providing some productivity improvements, but you still require a human prompt, right? It generates content, suggests code, and the human is still responsible for that end-to-end workflow orchestration. Which is why we have a model now with AI and agents, is you're thinking of how do we shift from a model where we're providing tools to help a human perform a job better, to delegating an entire strategic function to intelligent systems that can operate autonomously. Now, when you think about shifting this model of procuring software to procuring a digital workforce, it fundamentally changes the role of procurement. I think you're going to shift to a model where it's less focused on things like cost control and SLAs to how do we manage the consequence of autonomous actions. So this is a very powerful capability, but it brings a whole set of risks. So I won't go through these in detail, but let's highlight some of the things here, right? One is around governance and risk. I mentioned before about liability. How do we ensure that we have explainable AI and make sure we have an audit trail for these agents to be able to determine what actions they took and what was the rationale of why they took that action? Also around how do we safeguard against algorithmic bias, which is amplified by historical data. Security and data privacy. Agents require deep and trusted access to very sensitive data like financial records and contracts. And of course, this opens a huge surface area in terms of security. So how do we ensure there isn't shadow AI or leakage of data? And we also need to make sure that we have security policies that protect the agents themselves because they could be the victim of malicious attacks, prompt injection, where they can drive some unauthorized autonomous action. And what about vendor lock-in? When you think about learned intelligence, the cost to switch a vendor where they're basically building their optimization based on your proprietary data, based on your transaction data, the cost to switch could be very costly and disruptive. So how do we make sure we have protections in place if the vendor fails or they fail to deliver? And then lastly, data and integration readiness, right? That's the foundation for the agentic AI in the enterprise and making sure that across all your systems you have clean and harmonized data. And it's also what I consider orchestration ready, which basically means that it has APIs, data connectors to allow those agents to access that data in a very clean way. Now, addressing all of these risks requires a central nervous system. So think of having a trusted, secure, and governed ecosystem where you can find, manage, and deploy a new workforce. And so when we think about the enterprise controls that we've built into Marketplace over the last few years, we give you the foundation really to manage this transition. So we're moving beyond the model where you're managing individual software licenses to how you can orchestrate an entire compliant workforce of AI agents. So my vision is to make sure that Marketplace becomes that control panel for you in the agent economy. Now, for those who aren't familiar with Marketplace, it is broadly adopted by the enterprise. In fact, earlier this year, our CEO publicly disclosed that customers are procuring billions of dollars of solutions of software through our cloud marketplace. And we actually commissioned a study with IDC that was published earlier this year, which just basically shows the tangible and immediate benefits of B2B cloud marketplaces with third-party software, where we see very specific benefits around faster purchasing cycle times, faster deployment cycle times, and then finance and compliance teams' productivity gains. Now, if you're familiar, the biggest driver around cloud marketplace was around this cloud commit. So customers are making larger cloud commits. They get favorable discounting. They get access to incentives like credits and migration funds. And the ability to draw down marketplace spend against that commit de-risk that committed spend. But you also have benefits around things like consolidated billing. So instead of having hundreds of billing relationships with different vendors, you get a consolidated billing, additional line items on your monthly cloud invoice. And of course, on the purchasing side, you're creating pre-vetted security and compliance for a lot of these vendors. You have standard contracting templates, you have pre-approved budgets, and then on the technical side, you have fully validated solutions that work in the Google Cloud environment, and so you are able to get faster time to value for your end users. And then as you bring a lot of that spend online, you get all the benefits of advanced billing and cost management and FinOps tools that you typically use in a cloud environment for these solutions as well. So I want to touch briefly on this digital storefront that we've created. So think of it as the centralized place to search, discover, try, and buy a broad range of solutions. So historically, the solutions have been mostly tied to cloud migrations like security and data and analytics, but we have expanded the diversity of solutions in the past couple years. So one, we have commercial data sets from vendors like Dun & Bradstreet and Equifax. We have business applications from Workday and ServiceNow. And then we have professional services as a formal solution type that you can procure as well. And all these things we're doing is it's really reducing the time to basically research, vet, and review these vendors, and giving customers the ability to have this one-stop shopping experience to allow them to filter, find, and compare thousands of solutions. One new introduction we had about a year ago was the AI agent marketplace. So we currently have greater than 1,800 listings on the marketplace, and in that category, and the ability for customers to find these solutions that might be aligned to vertical, use case, platform affinities as well. Now, so the imperative is very clear that you need to scale or support the adoption of agentic AI in your organization, but without a plan, you're going to face spiraling chaos called AI agent sprawl, and this creates a lot of security, compliance, and hidden cost risk. So what you need is a central platform, such as Cloud Marketplace, where organizations can go find this trusted enterprise-grade agents, along with commercial data sets and professional services and business applications that have been validated for security and for production use. And the ability to bring this at a central governance level gives you a lot of advantages, right? You'll be able to have a centralized registry for every agent. You want to be able to track who owns it, what does it do, and what data does it have access to. You want to mitigate security risk by enforcing policies like security access and standardization of deployments. And of course, you want to have a very comprehensive observability because you want to be able to track and log every single action that the agent makes for legal and compliance purposes. And this centralized model also helps you scale in a very efficient way because As you grow, you can minimize the duplicative efforts that are deployed across organizations, and you can also manage some of the cost sprawl, because some of the value-based pricing, it's not predictable that we typically see, but if you can track real-time cost monitoring for every agent instance, it helps you build some of these capabilities. Let me talk briefly about a lot of the governance capabilities that we provided. I mentioned before that Marketplace acts as this initial vetting authority to de-risk the buying process. And so we have capabilities like private marketplace, which allows an organizational administrators to curate what solutions are available, including AI agents, to the end customer. We have very granular access controls in terms of who is allowed to buy, who's allowed to view. And then you combine that with some of the advanced FinOps and cost management capabilities, it brings together this really governed, data-driven financial operations platform that's really a necessity for the AI agent economy. Now, we've made a lot of investments over the last couple years to shift from this digital storefront to this governed platform to manage this digital AI workforce. But you'll continue to see innovation in this area. So what are some of the things we're going to invest in? One is around, we're going to be launching a semantic-based search. So imagine where traditional marketplaces are more focused on product listings that are static. We need to focus on business outcomes and drive recommendations to the customer. So a customer should be able to search, hey, I want to optimize my sales processes, and we should recommend those agents or collections of agents that will address those business problems. We need one-click orchestration. So when an agent is provisioned into the environment, you need to be able to make sure it has the right permissions and the right data access. And this includes multi-agent orchestrations, which will be required to operate and execute these complex workflows. Then we need to provide much more quality signals in your environment. So imagine a world where you have thousands or tens of thousands of these commercial agents in your environment. You need quality signals around what's the data lineage, what type of interoperability standards does it support, what type of validation has it achieved, because agents should not be a black box to you. You should have clear transparency as trust to ensure what agents should be deployed. And then lastly, what I would mention is that a lot of the explainability and auditing capabilities need to be sort of mandated as part of that process. And then the last thing I would say is we've also recently launched a payment protocol, an agent payment protocol. So as you give the capability for agents, they may go off and do purchases on their own. So the consolidated billing needs to incorporate and explain in a very auditable way all those microtransactions that happen on a single cloud bill. So I want to close by saying the AI agent economy is not coming, it's already here. And it's really transforming how work is done across all industries and all functions. And it's really an opportunity to elevate our role in the organization. So in some ways, we need to shift the model to be from a less of a gatekeeper to something that's more of a governor and orchestrator of this new digital workforce, because it's coming. And those companies that are able to master this, and to be clear, this is a very complex risk and commercial landscape we're dealing with, they will be more well-positioned to win in this AI agent economy. So my hope today is to energize you, to think that with a clearer vision that agents are coming, commercial agents, and with the right platform and the right governance model, they can be your biggest source of strength. So I would encourage you to continue this conversation and learn more about Google Cloud Marketplace, and our Gemini platform. And for folks who are here tomorrow, we are hosting an after drinks event at 4:30. It's actually at the DPW headquarters, which I believe is right down the street. And so it's a great opportunity to further discuss some of these interesting developments, ask questions, or just network with your fellow employees. So I hope to see you there. So as I mentioned, this is one of the most exciting times in technology, and I really want to work with you to capture this opportunity together. Thank you.